So just a reminder, in this next session, you can start asking questions as soon as the session begins. After the session, all of this material will be available on demand 24/7. And please visit each exhibitor's booth for more shareholder material. So right now, I'm very pleased to introduce the CEO of Wahupta.
Yeah, so I'm Warren Cudney, CEO and President of Wahupta. Wahupta Ventures, we are a company in the space of hemp. We were born out of necessity. We were working within the space in the United States. We were accessing and looking for hemp as an isolate, so the CBD as an isolate for a cannabinoid, and really had challenges trying to find that product. The brokerage firms and the people working in that space, there was really no authenticity, and we couldn't meet the demand that the market was asking for. So we really looked at the model of getting back into the roots of it and actually starting the farming process. So we started looking at the model in the United States and Canada, and obviously Canada has a little bit more, I think, freedom in terms of regulations. So we started by looking for farmers in Canada, and it wasn't just a land play to begin with, although that's, I think, a really important piece of it. So our objective to begin with was to try and farm out 200 acres of industrial hemp in Canada. First part of it was to try and find the right strain, Health Canada approved strain. We did that. We've teamed up with a tremendous seed supplier. He's a pedigreed seed supplier in Saskatchewan. So then our next stage was to try and find the farmers. So in order to really make our model work well, we had to have the very best in the industry. And I think if we take a look at the cannabis industry, and we'll talk a little bit more in terms of the differences between the two, but when you look at the cannabis industry, one of the challenges in the early stages was having people that were experts within the field that knew what they were doing. So there were a lot of challenges that really came about from that. So when we went to lock down farmers, we wanted acreage, but we wanted farmers that were working currently in hemp. Now in Canada, hemp for CBD really was non-existent, but that was really more about technology and teaching them how to harvest. That really wasn't about growing the plants. So we locked down, our objective was 200 acres, we've locked down just under 1,000 acres in year one, which is a tremendous volume. Our expectation is to turn that volume into about 1,000 pounds per acre, which is very conservative, and turn that into CBD isolate. So in Saskatchewan alone, we've got about 700 acres just outside Regina. We have another 200 acres on Indigenous land, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between our civilian land and our Indigenous land. So our partner in Manitoba is the Peguis, and they have 200 acres on what's called CP land. So we're working with them towards building out a much larger program for next year, but the 200 acres was there. We also have some acreage in British Columbia. We've got some in the interior in the Okanagan. We've got two sort of smaller scale farms that we're doing some stuff. There was an old vineyard, the Mount Boucherie Vineyard in Okanagan Falls, and another 10 acres right in Kelowna. And then we've also got a small test acreage in Alberta as well near Drumheller. So we amassed the land and we found the farmers, and they were hemp farmers. The secondary look was that we didn't have a hemp farmer. We wanted a farmer that was an oil-based farmer, something like canola. So they understood the process and that it wasn't just the plant that we were getting, we wanted the oil from it. Then the next part of the component was to be able to actually extract that oil. And so the process of having the plant all the way to an isolate is to take the plant and then you make a crude oil. So part of it was scale, really, because we wanted to get into tens of thousands of acres. It's not like cannabis where they're doing 5 or 10 or 50 pounds a day. We're looking at doing tens of thousands of pounds. So it was about finding technologies that fit that model. Technology is certainly evolving very quickly, but we found a company out of Victoria, and we picked that up as an asset of our company. We bought Kern Technologies, which had a novel technology that produces an oil or an isolate, a distillate that has a beautiful terpene profile, which gives us a much better product. So from that, we take that oil and then we put it into the open market, and we either sell it as an isolate, which is a single molecule powdered form, or we sell it as a distillate. We also have avenues for us through different GNC channels to be able to sell that to end users in products and to do white labeling programs as well. Part of, I think, the differentiator for us is that we really looked at the First Nations as an opportunity that was overlooked in the cannabis space and trying to find a way to involve them in the hemp space. I think there's a feel-good component, but I think there's a responsibility and a legacy that we can provide And in talking about that, some of these communities that we deal with have up to 85% unemployment and really don't have valuable tools and assets in terms of the labor market. And as we're starting to learn in the cannabis space and in the hemp space specifically, technology and skilled labor is really something that's in high demand. So we've started to partner with some universities that are building curriculum, and we're supporting the building of that curriculum within the hemp space and all the way through to the extraction. So now we have, I think, what is a pretty good loop. We have the farmers, we have the hemp. We'll bring down the 1,000 acres this year, and then we'll take that and use our technology on site at each one of these farms. You can imagine the mass project of trying to move 1,000 pounds times 1,000 acres. That biomass is really heavy. So instead, we're going to send extractors to each one of those locations, extract that into a crude oil, which is still only about a 30 to 40% oil, CBD oil, but then it's in a movable form. And there's some proprietary things we're doing in terms of the extraction I can't really speak about right now. But the model itself, I think, is very sustainable. And then we're building out on the Peguis land and in probably one other location in Canada, something called toll processing. So there's still a lot of biomass available in Canada. Once we've gotten through ours and we've created that crude oil and turned it into either a distillate, a high 80% CBD full spectrum oil, or into an isolate, then we can go back and take that equipment and capitalize it more with the product that's still available with farmers in the market. One of the things that we found is that it specifically and learned very quickly in the hemp market that the farmers have been selling it for food, and they've spent tens of millions of dollars producing their crops. They have sales contracts, and then all of a sudden it gets to the end when they're supposed to sell their crops to the end user, and the game changes, and they're told that there's overproduction. They really don't need their product. Those farmers are growing it for seed, which is a food. Hemp hearts is a really good example of that, or a lot of finished products. So what we found is those farmers are a little bit disgruntled. What they're getting is about $350 per acre for their product. So we brought in a model that we've eked out about $500 per acre for them, and we've given them some back end. So we've said that if we can work together to make sure we maximize that component of CBD, use the right genetics, and do everything we possibly can with some proprietary fertilizers and optimizers and things like that, if we can maximize that, then there's another carrot at the end that could take them between $800 and $1,000 per acre. So I think when we look at the model, the farmer's sort of been someone that's been, I think, taken most of the risk, given little reward. Sleepless nights. I've spent a lot of time with farmers in the last year, and getting up at 4 in the morning is really not what I want to do out in the land. So we have a lot of respect for them, but it's giving them an opportunity to be vested in the project. And really, I think going forward, there could be some regulations change as hemp becomes a very strong commodity and a good return on investment. The Canadian government will have to take a look at how much land should really be allocated for that plant and how much we should take away from the food source. So if we've already got the farmers that are licensed to grow the hemp for whatever purpose, I think we've got a leg up on that. So we built the model, and I think it's sustainable. We do have some partnerships in the United States with some native bands. We've been working, and it's difficult, but in the United States, there are tribal nations and they are Indian bands. In Canada, obviously, they're First Nations. But we've been working in North Carolina, specifically with the Eastern Band of Cherokee, and trying to develop a project there. And one of the lessons that we learned was that opioid addiction, as we know, is hitting all of us in our communities, but it really was hard hitting. And part of the challenge with elders in those communities, they don't want to bring another problem to the community. They want to find solutions. And I think they've been very fearful of cannabis. And there's a lot of, from the investment side, I think there's some investor fatigue in cannabis, and there's some unknown, and I think people are looking at where they want to put their money. And I think what Wahupta brings and the hemp industry brings is relief to a lot of things. But what we found was the elders really accepted CBD, and they see the relief, and they see the reports, and they see the studies coming out of Israel that CBD can mitigate the challenges with opioid addiction. And so it really becomes that Trojan horse. We can get in there and share with them what the relief is, and then it opens the door for the opportunities to further within the cannabis space and the medicines that cannabis can provide. So if I had to differentiate between cannabis and hemp, and what we're trying to do is we're a medicinal product. We don't have involvement in the recreational space. We're really about trying to provide a medicinal value and a product that's going to bring, I think, economic relief, medical relief, and I think change lives, and there really could be an opportunity for legacies here. And part of our bottom line is that we want to create programs for things like, opioid addiction. There's a lot of benefits with CBD in things like epilepsy, childhood epilepsy. I think there's lots of programs that we can start looking at and really start spending some of our bottom line dollars at creating some programs and some projects that could really provide relief. In terms of the fundamentals of the company and how we're structured, we currently have a non-offering prospectus at 50 cents. That holds also a 75-cent full warrant, and that warrant is for 3 years, which is a heck of a good carrot. That is for $3.5 million that we're looking to raise at this point, and that will capitalize us for all of the equipment we need for this year in Canada. And I think after that, we're self-sustainable. I don't think we need any more money from the market. We currently have 25 million shares outstanding, including all warrants. And with this other raise, including the warrants, that would take us just under 40 million. And we're pretty comfortable that we could keep ourselves under the 50 million mark, and that's really what we'd like to do. So we're tightly held. We currently have about 60 shareholders, and they're all, everything has been raised through friends and family. And our current till is about $600,000. And our burn rate is very, very minimal. We don't really have anything outside of farming practices and farming costs and travel expenses. We don't carry any wages. Everybody is vested in with no wages at this point. As we like to say, everybody sees the rainbows in the blue sky, and we're all working together to a great end. The model for year one should be around $55 million in revenue with a bottom line of about $30 million. So please, if you have any questions, we've got our folks here to answer them, and we're happy to answer all your questions on Wahupta, so thank you.